we're recording this to my computer, and we will eventually post this possibly on our VSPS website. My experience in the past with the recording is that I don't get your photos in the recording. So you don't have to worry about your identity when I am recording this. Again, going back to what we're doing, this is our 5th workshop. I'd like to say that we're starting in the beginning of February with our ABC boating safety course, the basic course. Bill and I are going to be teaching that course, and that's if you need information about that, put that in the chat and we'll send it to you. And Graham Hunter is going to be teaching the boat handling class, which is this kind of the 2nd level after the ABC Introduction to Boating Skills class. And Robert Jacobson is going to be teaching the weather class, which is a fairly advanced class on how to read weather charts and predicting and understanding forecasts for boating. So with this, I'm going to turn this over to Bill. Again, if you could all please keep your microphones muted. Every little sound does come through. And please do type your questions or wait till the end, write them down, and Bill will answer the questions at the end. So with this, I'd like to introduce Bill Moran. Bill is the safety officer of the Bellingham Sail and Power Squadron with me. We work together as a team. We try to work together as a team. Often we're working in opposition, but we do our best as a team. And Bill has put in, you cannot believe how many hours into this presentation to try to make it as good as it possibly can be, and to answer any questions that you might have, and to hopefully get you so you're not afraid to pick up that microphone and use the radio when it is appropriate to do so. So with that, I will turn this over to Bill.
Good evening, everybody. Like Madeline said, my name is Bill Moran. I'm one of the instructors at the Power Squadron. It's very possible you'll be able to see a marriage meltdown tonight. It's come close to that at home, so we've got it recorded so the marriage therapist can see it all in highlights. Let's see, I just want to point out a couple things as I begin here. This presentation will be focused on US boaters. There is a slight difference. If you boat in Canada, or if you're from Canada and boat up there, you do need to contact your resources, the Power Squadron, the Canadian Coast Guard, to get expert advice up there. I've talked to some of the Power Squadron members up there, and so I have a fairly good idea, but I don't want to come across as I don't know that I can defend what I'd say about it, where I'm real confident what I'll say about boating in the US. So I think that's about it. A couple of people have contacted me. I'm pretty nervous here. A couple of people have contacted me, and they said that they've bought boats, there's radios on their boats, they've never turned them on. So basically this presentation is going to be aimed at that level. And then if this is a review for some folks, so be it. Hopefully you'll learn something. But I do want to start out with the basics and just take it from there. Oh, and then I did give you a handout. I think there's 4 or 5 things on it, a couple of charts that show the channels for and frequencies for communications in Canadian waters, in the US waters. There's one real nice, valuable map of the weather broadcasting antennas. So we'll talk a little bit about the channels where you can receive broadcast weather while you're boating. And that map actually shows where those antennas are located. And then I put together a handout of like what I would consider suggestions maybe going forward to consider when you take your boat out. And then what was that about?
There was the 16.
Oh, and then there's a little bitty sticker. They're quite common. I don't know. It says it comes from the. I'll show you one later on. It's on the presentation. But I don't know. Oh. You're about to see the first fight. Apparently, I'm looking at the wrong camera. Okay, so anyway, there's a little sticker that it's very common. You can put it next to your radio. It's really important that you do as much as possible before you get into an incident or an emergency situation to make it so you don't have to rely as much on your brain when you're in that situation, because you won't have as many of your brain cells operate, and that's part of the fight or flight response to cut off blood to your brain. So just when you need it the most, it's not available. So write down as much as you can that can be used for you to just immediately go to if you get into some sort of an emergency. So unless there's a question, which hopefully there's not, we'll just get going here. How am I looking? Huh? Down, up? What do you think? This is brutal. Okay, folks, so I've not seen a presentation yet about the VHF radio where they don't immediately start out talking about, well, should I have a VHF radio or a cell phone? Well, they're two different pieces of equipment that are designed for two different purposes. So how do you want to do this? So let's talk firstly about the cell phone. One of the drawbacks, of course, you need to be in a service area. One of the advantages of it is you can contact local law authority. You can also, interestingly enough, if you have a emergency, I would say within 40 or 50 miles of Bellingham, give some consideration to dialing 911 on your cell phone. The fire department has their own boat that they'll dispatch for offering assistance. And they'll argue that they can get there faster than the Coast Guard because they have a more streamlined chain of command for issuing a response to an accident. So give that some consideration. The Coast Guard will not be able to locate your position based on your cell phone, although clearly cell phone, everybody else it seems like can, but the Coast Guard can't. And a cell phone is good for routine stuff. Like if you want to talk to somebody about how you're doing fishing or a good place to go out and eat tonight, that's really not an appropriate use of the radio. The radio is designed for safety. And so it's the needs of the boat and emergencies, and then things that are safety oriented. And we'll cover some of that a little bit later. The transmission power of a cell phone is about 3 watts. It's quite a bit higher on your boat radio. And then a huge advantage of a cell phone is if you have any kind of an internet connection, man, you've got the whole library of all your resources there on your boat. So first aid stuff, motor stuff. I mean, just everything is available. It's hard to discount how important that is. Now, the radio, on the other hand, is hard to beat that for safety reasons. First of all, you can use it to summon assistance. They can figure out your position based on the radio. You can constantly get updated and important weather for where you're boating on the radio. And there's 2 types, there's 2 levels of power use on it. So you can go to a high power setting or a low power setting. One thing that you should know about the radio is it's not protected communication. I mean, anything you say over that radio, a lot of people are going to hear. So you should know that. So I would suggest you have them both. You wouldn't think one is better than the other. They're typically designed for 2 different purposes. We use our cell phone to open our float plan, but I really like having the radio on board. Okay, for definitions today for things that we're going to talk about, VHF stands for very high frequency. Now, why is that important? Well, it's only important in the sense from when you get from low frequencies to super high frequencies. As you go up that chain, the radio itself has different capabilities. At the low end, typically you can transmit farther than you can at the high end. At the high end, it'll actually penetrate walls and stuff. But VHF is kind of in the middle and a little bit high. So it's a line of sight communication. But it has a good range, 25 nautical miles would be a typical range for it, and based on 25 watts. Now in the radios, in marine radios, one of the things that's a little bit different is instead of talking about frequencies, we talk about channels. So we'll talk about channel 16 or channel 9 or the working channels. You should know that those are just, it's just another way of saying frequencies. Simplex versus duplex. We get into that in the sense that a simplex transmission is one where you transmit and receive on the same frequency. So why is that important? Well, it means that if you're transmitting, nobody can transmit back to you. A duplex, it's a transmit on one frequency and receive on a different one. Now, virtually all the transmissions you'll be doing with the boat radio will be simplex transmissions. Digital select calling is something relatively new to boating. It's been around about 22 years now. It's in about the third evolution, I would say, of development. You'll hear more about it throughout the presentation. And then Maritime Mobile Service Identity, MMSI is what everybody abbreviates that and refers to it as. And it's basically a telephone number for your VHF radio. Okay, we'll start right out. Radio requirement. First of all, in the United States, you're not required to have a VHF radio on your boat if your boat is less than 65 feet. Now, there's some caveats to that. If you work commercially and your boat's less than 65 feet, you're probably going to be required to have it. If you're a small tugboat, I mean, there's just a lot of, it's not enough just to say if you're 65 feet or less, but typically if you're just a recreational boater out there and your boat's less than 65 feet, you do not need to have a VHF radio on board. And that puts you into a category that the Coast Guard regards as the voluntary boat rules. So you're not like your radio doesn't need to be inspected. Your radio station doesn't need to be inspected. You wouldn't need an operator's license if you just boated within the confines of the United States. Okay, now we're going to discuss a little bit about fixed radios versus handheld radios. We'll cover first the fixed radios. Like, I don't know, you can see this over here on my side. All right. And then here's a handheld. So let's just go to the next slide and we'll see where that takes. I think it's just that radio that you're looking at now is very, very similar to the radio on my left here. They're both DSC radios. The controls are very similar, but they are different. And I really want to emphasize that you need the operating manual on your radio. They're all different to some degree. There's subtle little differences. Like this radio on my left, you push the button to turn it on, and you push and hold the button to turn it off. This radio in front of you on the PowerPoint, because you turn the knob to turn it on, and you turn it off. The radio in front of you on the PowerPoint, you'll see a little button that says DSC on it. Well, I'm guessing, I don't have the manual for that particular radio, but my guess is that takes you to a menu that allows you to make other choices regarding a DSC communication. This one's a little bit different. This one on my left, you can't send out an emergency call unless you've taken the time to register the radio. That may not be true with the white one that's on your screen. So there's a lot of little differences, and it really behooves you. You don't have to know everything about the radio. There's some of it that's is clearly written by engineers, and it's not easy to understand. But the basics on how to use it and how to use it to make a DSC call are important. Okay, so we'll go through some of the controls on it. That's the on-off switch. Now this is the squelch switch. Some of you may never have used a squelch switch. What that is for is it's for limiting the amount of interference, noise interference, RF interference that your radio receives. You want to receive the strongest signal you can, and to do that, you have to be able to adjust right where that noise cuts off. So there's a switch here I'm going to show on this how you do it. You would turn the radio on, and then the squelch switch, I'm going to adjust all the way counterclockwise. Now that is the noise. Now that noise, let me turn that off. That noise might be coming from the lights above my head. It might be coming from the AC circuits in the wall behind me. It can be coming from anywhere. And so we want to limit that as much as possible. We want to get the most signal we can, and still eliminate the squelch, so the noise. So we turn the radio on, we turn the squelch off, let all the noise through, and then we back it off clockwise until that noise just stops. That allows us the strongest signal we can possibly get, given the noise that's in this room right now. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, the high-low switch, it's required by the FCC that marine radios have 2 modes of operation, 1 watt and 25 watts. You won't see a marine VHF radio sold to the recreational public, at least, that exceeds 25 watts. There's always a selector that will take you to the discrete weather channels. There's 10 weather channels, where if you push that button, it'll put you in this little subset of 10 channels of just weather. Now, out of those 10 channels, anywhere in the San Juan Islands, you can probably get 3 or 4 weather stations. 2 or 3 will be US and 2 or 3 will be Canadian. And then there's always a 16 button, 16 or 9 button. 16 is referred to as the hailing button or the emergency distress button. And by not distress button, but emergency broadcast button. So you would use that button, channel 16, to declare an emergency or to broadcast to another boat or station that you want to talk to them. So it's called a hailing channel and an emergency channel. 9, on the other hand, is just a hailing channel. And it's used in parts of the country where there's so much boat traffic that it overwhelms the one channel 16. So they put 2 hailing channels on there, 16 and 9, but 16 is still the only one that's used for emergency uses. The up-down buttons on this particular radio would move from, like channel 16, you hit the up buttons, it would just start cycling through the channels. Now, a typical radio like this to my left, and you're looking at, when you buy it, it comes with about 60 channels on it. You only need to know about 11 channels, and 5 of those are referred to as hailing channels. So there's not a lot of memory involved in getting around these channels. You can do an awful lot of boating and only know 5 or 6 different channels on this radio. Now, this is the one distress, the DSC function. This is new in the last 22 years. And if you were to push and hold that, if this radio either had an internal GPS or was hooked to an external GPS, it would broadcast your position and your, and if you had taken the time to register your radio and get an MMSI number, it would also broadcast your MMSI number. Now, most of these radios, when you push that, also give you the ability to define what's wrong with you in kind of broad categories. You're sinking, you're on fire, you're being pirated. I mean, it gives you like 8 or 10 different choices. On some radios, you have to go to a separate menu to access those choices. On this radio over here, you literally push the red button momentarily once and it brings up the menu for those different categories. You get to select the category, then you push the button a second time and hold it for 5 seconds, and that sends your message out. Now, I'm going to say this once, I'll probably say it a couple times tonight. 90% of the time the Coast Guard receives a DSC message, there's no position information on it, 90% of the time, which is kind of a waste of this radio, of the beauty of this radio. So I really encourage you, if you have a DSC radio, to take the time and figure out if you're getting GPS information. Either it's generated internally with its own GPS receiver, or it's coming in externally. Now, typically the way you can find that out is on some radios, when you initially turn them on, it'll show you the lat and long of your position. On other radios, I think the one we have on our boat continuously shows you your lat and long. So again, it's back to the manual to figure out what's going to take place on your particular radio. And then the microphone button, for those of you who've never used one, you push it to talk and you release it to listen. Push to talk and release to listen. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, now there's some general condition or general things about VHF radios. A fixed radio, like you see here on my left, has a separate antenna. Now, if there's something you want to do that would increase the range of your radio, it would be get your antenna higher. And with these handhelds, unless you're going to go out and, you know, climb a mast or something and hold above your head, they're just not going to be that high. So that's one thing that's going to limit the range of a handheld radio. The fixed mount, on the other hand, you can mount at the top of the highest part in your boat, and you can get them, you know, quite a ways up there, 20, 25 feet, pretty common. The higher you get them, the farther they will transmit. 25 watts of power is the high power setting on this radio, and 1 watt is the low power setting. All new models after 1999 require the DSC mode in them. So that's how you can tell if it's DSC is look for that red button, should have that on it. In about 2010, they did one modification. They what did they do in 2010? Anyway, I'll think about it. I'll come up with it. And then about 2015 or 18, they came out and said the radio had to have the ability to do a DSC test, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So that's a fairly recent evolution that's been made. Okay, now the handhelds, like I just pointed out, they have an integrated antenna, lower height, less range. The transmission power is much reduced. The high power setting is 5 or 6 watts. The low power setting is 1 watt. And they may or may not be waterproof. This is a ICOM ICM25. It's not waterproof, costs about $125. Is that a question? Nope, okay.
You want to hold it closer so they can see?
Oh, it's just a simple IC M25, I think, yeah, M25 ICOM. Okay, this is basically this is I think a little bit older model of the same ICOM mode. It's getting to the point now. We had one of these exactly like this on the screen. It was actually cheaper to buy a new radio at $125 than it was to replace the battery in the older radio. So we'll just go through there. You can't see all of the antenna, but it sticks up a little bit higher than that. It's probably 9 or 10 inches long. The speaker, the microphone is down here on this one. It's up on the top on the one you're looking at. That you can see the squelch button. So I don't have the manual in front of me on this, but as I recall, you push that button and then there's nothing to turn. So you use the up and down arrows to adjust the squelch. It has a high-low power button, but again, it's only 5 or 6 watts on the high power and 1 watt on the low power. And it has a scan button, which allows you to just cycle through 2 or 3 different channels or continually through all the channels. Again, I'd have to read the manual on this one to know exactly what it does. It has the 16:9 button, just like the bigger one does. And the up-down arrows are typically used generally just for channel changing. Has a weather button. So again, you push that button, it takes you to the sub-menu of just the 10 channels of weather. And you can see the on-off button on the top. Okay, VHF radios, like we've talked about, they're limited to line of sight communication. So if there's an island between you and what you're trying to call, you might get them, you know, you might give it a shot, but you may not get them either. So you just should remember that it's line of sight. Typically a long range would be 25 nautical miles, and the actual range is based on the height of the antennas and the transmitted power. Now this is an example. It's a real neat little graph that shows how the higher the antenna, the longer you can receive and transmit a signal. So if you look to be on the right side of that picture, you'll see a sailboat with 21-foot antenna height, and it looks like that's measured to the middle of the antenna height. And you'll notice that it has a range of about, looks like 21 miles. It's a 300-foot high antenna. The sailboat right next to it has a 30-foot high antenna height. It has a 6.6 nautical mile range. Well, then you go to the other side of the earth and you notice that the receiving, maybe the second sailboat from the end has a 24-foot high antenna with about a 6-mile range. We add those two numbers together. So you get the sailboat on the right at 6.6 and the sailboat on the left at 5.9, and you get, you know, around 13 or 14 miles of range that they can talk to each other.
And this one was on land.
That one, yeah, the one on the right is just exactly what you'll see from those. Interesting, Graham, he has one of those antennas, within a rock's throw of his house, I swear to God. And then we live probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles from Graham. Neither one of us can get that antenna. We both think we're underneath the cloud or the umbrella of the transmission. We're too close to it to get the transmission, because I have a radio at home that I have in my shop for listening to weather, and I just find that interesting. We're too close. Okay, word about antennas. The higher they're mounted, the better. The more gain, the better. Typically, a way that you can measure gain is just by the length of the antenna. It seems like the longer the antenna is, the higher the decibel rating on the antenna. And the ICOM sites and actually all of the radio sites will say the same thing. Buy the best antenna that you can afford for the application you're going to use it. Not everybody wants or needs an 8-foot antenna. You don't want that on the top of a sailboat. It'd be much smarter to put a 3-foot antenna up there. Okay, pressing right along here. Licenses. Well, in the United States, if you just boat within the United States, there's no license required for your radio. There are licenses required if you travel to Canada or if you travel abroad. And they're international rules. They're not anything that the Coast Guard can arbitrarily change or anybody else can change. It actually takes an act of Congress to change them. So if you're operating within the continental United States, you do not need a license or either a station license or an operator permit to operate your radio. But if you go international, and Canada is considered international, you are required to have a station license and an operator's license. Now, the operator's license is referred to as a restricted radio telephone operator permit. It costs $60 and it's good for your life. The ship's station license costs $160 and it's good for 10 years. So if you decide to go to Canada, you're required to have those 2 items. Now, I want to put a caveat on that and say it's probably the least enforced rule you'll ever come up against. All right, so it's a rule that's there. I'm not going to say don't do it because it's there, and it actually there's an advantage to doing it, which I'll explain in just a minute. But you probably won't spend a lot of hard time if you go up there and you don't get a station license. Now, if you do get a station license and you've already gotten you've registered your radio as and gotten an MMSI number on it, the FCC has to give you the MMSI number for a station license. So you'll need to cancel your MMSI number that you have on your radio and get a new one issued to you by the FCC if you decide to get the station license. Does that make sense? I wish I could see everybody's face, because typically this is where you see the blank looks on people and stuff. You're too far away. My glasses aren't that good. So, all right. The operating procedures of the radio, you can only use it on a boat. If you were to take this handheld and go on shore, you actually need a station license for that, a different type of station license. So they're only good on boats. And you can only use them for essential communication. You can't call up your buddy and have him make fishing arrangements for you, or hotel or restaurant, any of that stuff. They're there for safety. There's an international rule that's in, this is a big deal now. And it's if you have a marine radio and it's installed in your boat, you're required to have it turned on channel 16 and monitored it anytime the boat is underway. That's the law. All right. And that dates back to the sinking of the Titanic. 2 years after the sinking of the Titanic, they had a group called SOLAS, Save Our Lives at Sea, international organization that formed at the sinking of the Titanic. They got together, they decided, how can we make the waters safer for, in this case, it was commercial boating, carrying goods and people on the high seas. And they came up with a recommendation that there needed to be a radio on, turned on, and watched while you were underway. So. And
A
monitor.
question?
Yes.
Do you need a license for Canada if under 65 feet?
If you're a US boat and you want a boat in Canadian waters, you're required by the regulations to have a station license and an operator permit, a restricted radio operator permit. So
No matter what size.
yeah, that's less than 65 feet. If you're over 65 feet, you probably needed the station license before you ever went to Canada. But if you're less than 65 feet, you don't need it in the US, but the minute you cross that border, you need the station license and the restricted radio operator permit. Is that, yes, sir?
I think we've got 45 days free once we go into Canada before we encounter their rules.
You know, you do. I think you know, their rules are the same coming this way. They don't have to have a radio up there either, but if they cross the border down here, they have to have a radio and they have to have a permit to operate it. A little bit different technique, I think, in getting the permit. All we do is fill out a form and send in our $60. They actually have to take a test. We don't have to do that. And there is a grace period between when you go to Canada and your rules apply to them or their rules apply to us. But I don't believe there's grace on the radio operating permit.
I don't think
I
so
believe when
either.
you cross the border, that you don't have to use your radio up there, then you don't need a permit. You know, but if you use your radio up there, you need a station license and you need an operator permit.
2 more questions.
Yes, sir.
Can the radio also be on scan when 16 and another channel is being used?
Interesting question. And the short answer is no, it can't. And that's almost counterintuitive. Their suggestion is that you buy 2 radios, maybe a handheld, and keep it tuned to 16 while you have the more expensive radio scanning. But no, actually, it doesn't qualify. If you have the scanning mode going on your radio and 16 being one of the channels, that doesn't qualify as an active watch for channel 16. And my guess is because if some other channel comes up that you're not even involved with, you've lost the ability to monitor 16 because your radio is now defaulted to giving you all the broadcast from this other channel. So I don't know the actual reason for it, but I know that is correct, that you can't use the scanning function and 2 other channels and consider that monitoring 16. Yes, sir.
2 more questions, Bill. One is, I have an MMSI number, but no operator or station license. Do I need a new MMSI number to get the licenses?
If you, and I'll explain the reasons why. If you get a station license, unless your MMSI was issued by the FCC, which it probably wasn't, most people get them through the Power Squadron or Boat US. They're free from the Power Squadron. They're free from Boat US if you're a member, and they're $25 if you're not. If you've got an MMSI number from them and then you go get a station license, the FCC has to issue you a new MMSI. And the reason for that is the Coast Guard will take that MMSI and make sure all the countries get that information. There's no guarantee that the Power Squadron or Boat US will do that. So you could register your radio in the US, let's just say through the Power Squadron. If you go into Canada and declare an emergency, the MMSI information may not be broadcast to the Canadian Coast Guard. That's the dilemma in going up there with like a free MMSI you got in the US. The information may not make it across the border. Yes, sir.
And one more from Robin saying, do we need a license even when we're just fishing?
No. Well, you need a license. I don't know what you do when you're fishing, but technically you only need the license if you're going to use the radio. I mean, if you turn it off and never turn it on, which you can't do. I mean, the one rule says if you're underway and you have a radio, you got to turn it on. I don't know if receive only is considered using your radio. That I don't know. But if you intend to use your radio in Canada, technically you do need a license. And I'm falling back on the word technical because, like I said, you probably won't do any hard time. Yes, sir.
And Eric or Ione asks, some VHF radios prioritize channel 16 when they're scanning. That's just a comment.
Say that again.
That's
So-
correct.
So some VHF radios prioritize channel 16 when it's scanning.
Right, but if you're in the scanning mode, it doesn't count as using it as a watch. I mean, that's pretty clear in the FCC rulings and the Coast Guard information. If you're using it in a scanning mode, which you have to put the radio into that mode, it's not considered monitoring channel 16. Even though I get it, you know, I understand where you're coming from. They just don't consider it.
So it was a prioritization. So it prioritizes 16.
Well, you're saying it automatically just defaults to 16.
If somebody
That's,
talks. maybe.
yeah, that's a good, I don't know the answer to that one then, if it has a priority. I didn't encounter that in any of the reading I did.
We'll look into that.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, any others?
No.
Okay, good questions, really good questions. Let's see. Yeah, you can only use the radio on your boat. Land operation requires a special license, and it's limited to summoning assistance, safety purposes, and the needs of the vessel. Channel allocation. Now here's the 11 channels. 16 is the hailing and the emergency and the distress channel. Channel 9 is the backup to 16. It's just another hailing channel. They use it primarily on the East Coast where they have a lot more small boat traffic. What are referred to as the working channels. Now these are some, you don't have to know them, but it's not, I mean, just write them down and put them around your radio, because what will happen is if you want to call somebody else on your radio, the first thing you're going to do is go to one of these working channels and make sure nobody's using it. And then you're going to call them on 16 and basically tell them to meet you on the working channel that you've already pre-decided to use. So the ones 68 and 72 are used, what, 90% of the time probably. So if you use 69, 71, or 78, there's probably not going to be much traffic on that. So one of the first steps in making a VHF radio call is to go to one of those working channels and make sure nobody's already using it. And then you call whoever you're trying to contact and tell them, okay, I want you to go to this channel that you've already kind of pre-screened. And the DSC is only channel 70. You have no access to channel 70. It'll come up in your scanner when you run your rotator around. It doesn't operate through the 1 watt or the 25 watt. It has its own separate circuitry. The ICOM would not tell me how much power it uses. They said they'd have to kill me if they went to that level, so didn't get the information. And then the other channels are, what's the next page, Madeline? The vessel traffic is 5A for the North Sound, channel 14 for the South Sound, and bridge-to-bridge communication is 13. So those are the only 11 ones you really need to know. The weather, they're 1 through 10. So what'll happen is you'll select the weather channel and you'll scan through it and you'll find you get, we'll say 2, 3, 5, and 7. And then you'll move your boat in somewhere else and maybe one of those will drop off and a new one will come up. So all you do is you scan through the weather channels till you get something that you're receiving is clear and appropriate for the area you're going to boat. Okay, now we're going to make a routine call without using DSC. So kind of the traditional way to make a routine VHF call. So the first thing we do is just exactly what I showed you on this radio. You turn it on, you set the volume, and you adjust the squelch. Now, the way we do it on our boat is the volume is separate from the on-off switch. So we do this in May, and then we don't address it the whole rest of the boating season because it doesn't seem to change very much. But we'll turn the volume on, adjust the, set the volume, adjust the squelch. And then if I want to make a call, we'll say to Graham, what's your boat's name?
Shearwater.
Shearwater, that's right. So if I want to make a call to Graham, the first thing I'll do is I'll go to the working channels and see which one is free. And we'll just say we checked 68, nobody's talking on it. You should know that according to FCC regulations, nobody can hold a conversation for longer than 30 seconds. So they shouldn't be on there just BSing. They should get on and they should get off. And then I'll go back to channel 16 and there'll be a button for that, right? You just hit that 16 button, takes you right back to channel 16. You hit the power level button to reduce it to 1 watt, unless you know the person you're calling is a long ways away. You just start out at 1 watt and see if you can contact them on that. Okay, and then the next page. Then you'll push the mic button. Here, you'll push the mic button, and again, it's push to talk, release to listen. Push to talk, release to listen. And what you'll say into it is the vessel's name you're going to call, Shearwater in this case. You'll say it 3 times. Now, I say that, but there's no requirement that you say it 3 times. There is a requirement that you can't say it more than 3 times. So the more you say it, the more likely somebody is to hear it. So you'll push the mic and you'll say, Shearwater, Shearwater, Shearwater. This is Hanu, Hanu, Hanu. Suggest 6-8. And then you release the mic button. And then if Graham's listening on his radio, he'll hear his boat's name 3 times, and he'll hear mine. He'll pick up the mic hopefully, and he'll go, Hanu, this is Shearwater, switching to 6-8. Then we're both switched to 6-8. We have our conversation, brief 30-second conversation. We both say out and we hang up. That's really all there is to it. Now, if he doesn't reply, you wait 2 minutes before you start the process again. If you started the process at 1 watt, you may want to boost it up to 25 watts the second time. So that was I'll push I don't want to push the button. There's no antenna hooked up to this radio. It'll hurt it. So I'd push the button, Shearwater, Shearwater, Shearwater. This is Hanu, 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 suggest 6-8, over, and release the mic. And then hopefully Graham hasn't put me on his no talk to list, and he'll call back and say, yep, let's meet on 68. Okay,
There's a question.
question, yes.
Why do we need to set it at 1 watt?
Well, it's so that the guy,
Could you say the question?
so the question was, why do we need to set it at 1 watt? That's the recommended setting from the Coast Guard and the FCC for your initial call, so that you don't blanket out all the other boats around you. Remember, it's a simplex operation. So if you put out transmission in a big radius, nobody else can use that radio while you're talking, and that's in that radius. So you want to keep the radius of transmission as small as you can. And then you don't want somebody 20 miles away listening to your conversation anyway. Or maybe you do, I don't know. But the smaller your transmitting power, the less people will be listening to your conversation. Good question. So you start out with 1 watt. A classic would be, let's say you're boating to Friday Harbor. Well, the channel, I think the harbor master's working channel there, I believe is 6.6. Does that sound right?
6.7, 6.6. Yeah.
6.6 or something like that. So you would find that information out. You don't have to go through 16 now with them, because you know they're monitoring 66 or whatever channel they operate on. So you literally tune your radio to 6.6, pick up the mic and go, Friday Harbor Harbor Master, this is Hanu. You can say it 1 to 3 times. If they're busy and you say it 3 times, people are all going to roll their eyes. So, use a little discretion there. Clearly they're listening for everybody. It's not like they've set the mic down and walked away. So anyway, you call up Friday Harbor Harbor Master. This is Hanu on 6.6, over. And then when they get a break, they'll call you back. Hanu, this is Friday Harbor Harbor Master. What can we do for you? And you'll say, I want a slip for the night with 37 feet over long, starboard tie. And they'll come back and go, sorry, we don't have anything till late August, maybe beginning of September. You just work on with your life. Yes, Graham.
Okay, let's see. The question is, where do we set the power on the radio? In other words, where do you set the wattage?
Oh, okay, good question. So again, if on this, it's different on all radios, but what you'll see is what's referred to as an H/L button. That stands for high/low. So high will be 25 watts transmission, low will be 1 watt. On this radio, on this handheld radio,
Can you see that?
down a little, right? Oh, I don't know if you can see it, but is it HL button? Is it an HL button now? So on that, it'll be an HL button, high being on this 5 or 6 watts and low being 1 watt. But you'll have to look on the face of your radio. It should be an H/L button, and it'll stand for high or low.
Next question is, why is the next jump up to 25 watts?
Can't answer that. I know it's an FCC rule that says the radio can't have more than 25 watts and must have a 1 watt capability.
Next question is, what is the 1 watt range?
That's a really good question. I don't know. As throwers, you can throw a rock. I mean, who knows, because it'll depend on how high your antenna is. I don't know. I'm guessing half a mile to a mile. I don't, that's a great question. I don't have the answer for you. I'm guessing a half mile to a mile.
That's it.
Okay, thanks. That's just a guess though. So any questions regarding making a routine radio call? You all feel confident going out there, grabbing the radio and not embarrassing yourself? It's one of those things, the more you use it, the more comfortable you are using it. The more you listen to it, the more likely you are to understand what's being said on it, because you start understanding what's being said, so you're kind of looking for what's being said. All right.
Yeah, we do practice radio calls in your class.
Yeah, in the basic boating class, we try to do practice ones, but still, you do 1 or 2 calls in February, by the time June comes away, that stuff's history, and grab it with trepidation. Okay, now it's interesting. The FCC and the Coast Guard really don't have urgent calls. This is just something that you'll notice if you do any kind of reading on these two subjects. There's basically 4 types of calls. There's just a normal call, and there's a distress call. And then in between the two is what are referred to as pon-pon calls and security calls. Neither the pon-pon or the security call can be made on a digital select radio. They can be made just as a regular call, but they can't be, there's no function on it. And if there was a function, if you've got a new generation VHF radio that might have that function, I talked to the Coast Guard, they have no way of receiving it. So, okay, securities, you'll hear about these a lot. If you listen to channel 16 a lot, you'll hear Bellingham Coast Guard station will come up and they'll go, security, Bellingham Coast Guard station. We want you to switch over to 22 alpha. And so you switch over to 22 alpha, and then they'll give you a security message. And often it could be a barge is loose drifting, it's logs drifting, it's a buoy that's moved from its position. It'll have something to typically do with navigation and safety, but it won't be necessarily like immediate life threatening. It's just something like you need to really be aware of this. You yourself can make a security message. If you are out there, say you're going through the Swinomish Slough and you notice a log that's stuck into the mud and the end of it sticking 4 feet out of the water, you can pick up your radio, security. This is the Hanu, security. There's a log at the, what's that name of that curve at the south end?
Oh, blind man.
Blind man, something down there.
The wall.
Yeah, the curve, everybody, the curve. So there's a curve at the south end, there's a log sticking out of it on the east side of the curve or something like that. It's just to report something that other boaters should know about. I remember we heard a security once. It was a boat that had started up and was running and nobody was in the boat. Okay. Good. And this is what one sounds like. So we're going to show you an example and hopefully it'll work. So to keep going through it, I just keep, okay.
Security. This is impulse. Security, impulse. My GPS position is latitude 38 degrees, 26 minutes north, longitude 86 degrees, 35 minutes west. Floating pilings in the water have fallen from a barge. Proceed with extreme caution in this area. Impulse, out.
Okay, that was a security. It was a well done security message. All right, pon-pon is for something that does involve some sort of risk higher than security, but hasn't reached the level of an emergency distress call. So examples would be you ran out of fuel, you're lost in the fog, unable to control or operate the vessel. I think the one you're going to hear now is the guy ran out of, his engine quit or something. He's by a bridge. It's a higher level than security, but it still isn't distress yet.
Pon. Angler. Pon.
So he transmits that out. His expectation will be that the Coast Guard's going to reply back and say, whatever the boat's name is, I forgot. This is Coast Guard, go ahead, please. And then he'll
This is Coast Guard Cortez, over. Front line angler. My position is near Daymark 7-8 on the Intercoastal Waterway, north of the Hardly Ever Open Bridge. Total engine failure. We're anchored, but unable to maneuver. 4 persons on board, no injuries. We are a 25-foot cruiser, flying bridge, colored white with blue trim. Angler, over. Station Cortez, decimal 42136 is on the way to your position. Coast Guard out.
Okay, now that's a good pon message, but the Coast Guard dispatching a boat to you is probably not going to happen in maybe 1 in a million opportunities. So the first thing they'll do is ask if there's anybody boating in the vicinity of you that can lend assistance to you. And so that's why if you're always monitoring 16 and you get a pon message, you can start, if they give lat and long, you can go over and chart that, plot that on your chart and figure out where that vessel is in relation to you to see if you can go give us assistance to them.
And this is a good reason to take one of our classes where we teach you how to plot on the chart. A paid political announcement. So.
Yeah. Okay, any questions on making a pon or security call? You hear security calls a lot. You'll hear those if you monitor 16. The Coast Guard, when they get them, they always refer you to 22 Alpha. And I just want to put this out briefly. For some reason, annually, there must be an award in the Coast Guard that goes to the Coast Guard radiomen who can talk the fastest, because they have guys there that talk so fast. I mean, I have listened to radios professionally and as an amateur status my whole life, and I can't understand what they're saying. They're talking so fast. So, you know, I don't know what advise them, because like if they tell you to go to, like last year we're out there boating and they found a kayak floating in this area, and they asked boaters to keep their eye out, but nobody could understand. I'm guessing nobody could understand where the guy where the kayak was overturned at, because nobody could understand what he was saying. He said it so fast. And the irony to me was it was on 22 Alpha. So he makes the security call, and there's literally 10 minutes of silence until he makes the security call again and spews it out so fast nobody can understand it. So I don't understand why they do that. But trust me, it's not you. Some of those people just talk way too fast for anything. But you should have a pencil and paper around your radio. And if you hear a security call or a pan call, if they start giving you position, write it down, because they'll come back in 8 or 10 minutes and repeat it if it's a long lasting issue. Now the Mayday is the big one. That's for immediate danger to life and property. It's the one you hear about all the time. You hear them, I'm guessing we hear 1 or 2 a year. But of course, if your radio isn't on, you'll never hear one. So there's an argument for turning it on right there. We've heard them. And we've also heard them that were Mayday calls that didn't transcribe to anything that what you're about to hear. I'm going to tell you the right way to do it according to the FCC and the Coast Guard. But you should know, if you have a Mayday, if you grab that mic and start talking, it doesn't matter what you remember this presentation today, eventually you will get the help you need if it's available. You just got to get on that radio and talk in common sense words and get your message out. We were just a short story. We were an early morning trip. We were somewhere between Campbell River and Nanaimo on the southwest side of Georgia, those streets of Georgia. And this woman came on, just grabbed the mic and started talking. You know, this is an emergency. I got an emergency here. And man, there's just, everybody's listening at that point. You know, it didn't matter that she didn't know the correct way to do it. Everybody's paying attention. And she and her husband were in this about a 35, 40-foot boat. They just pulled out of the marina, and her husband had a heart attack. And over the next 20, 30 minutes, we just listened as this woman realized the guy died. But the point was she needed help, and she got it from that radio. She needed help to get the boat back into the marina. She wasn't even thinking of getting it to the slip, just get it in the marina so I can get some assistance for my husband here. But she didn't follow anything that you're about to hear, and she still got what she needed. Wouldn't have mattered if she'd have followed this or not. She'd have got the same exact help.
Got two
Yes, sir.
Two questions about boats that don't have names yet.
Okay, what's the questions?
What if the boat doesn't have a name yet?
Well, a name isn't the only thing you can use to identify yourself. You can identify yourself with an MMSI number. You can identify it with what it looks like, a description. We're a 35-foot green sailboat that doesn't have a name. You know, the Coast Guard will probably talk to you about that later, but you can just tell them you don't have a name on the boat, but you're green and white 35-foot sailboat, whatever you are. They need to identify you. Now, they're going to want to call you something over that radio. So you can use if you have a station license number for your station, for your phone or radio, you can do that. I mean, just use your name. If you want to use your last name, I totally understand that. But just give them something so they can refer to you over the radio.
Second question?
That was it.
Okay.
Two questions about boat names.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. So here's Mayday information. This is what you're going to want to give them. Name a vessel or yourself with a guess if you don't have one. The location of where you're at, nature of the distress, description of the boat, number of persons aboard, what's their condition, and then the seaworthiness of the boat. One of the questions, if you don't answer it, an initial deal is that everybody has their life jackets on, because the Coast Guard, that'll be the first thing they ask is, you got enough life jackets and is everybody wearing them? Okay, here's what an emergency call sounds like. First of all, when you leave or come back to channel 16, always check your radio, because a lot of them have a feature that always puts you at high power. So if you leave to go check, a channel to see if it's clear, and you go back to 16, it doesn't matter that you've set low power on 16 earlier in the day. It always goes back to high power when you go back to 16. So you want to check your power level on 16. It will, unless you've set it low, its default position will be at high power. You make a Mayday call, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Hanu, 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 a white 37-foot trawler. I'd give them either my location by position or my location by lat and long. The nature of the emergency, number of people on board, we're all wearing life jackets. Then I'd release the transmission button and wait. And if no response comes in 30, 40 seconds, I'd repeat it again. Now, the hard part by far is going to be you if you're listening to this message, because you're probably want to do something. And the best thing you can do initially is write down their location and the name of the vessel. That's the best thing you can do initially. Write down their location, the name of the boat, and start figuring out where they are in relation to you, so that if later on, if the Coast Guard asks for assistance, you'll be able to tell them you can, or you won't be able to say, you won't say anything if you can't help them. Okay, so we're going to hear a Mayday call. Now this would be a letter of the law Mayday call. This is how they according to the FCC and Coast Guard, this is what they should sound like.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Sailboat Windsong, Windsong, Windsong. Mayday, Windsong, over.
Now he's
Vessel calling Mayday. This is Coast Guard Station Cortez. What's your nature of distress and your position, over? Sailboat Windsong, my position is approximately 5 miles off Egmont Key. Compass bearing is 120. Slowly sinking, estimated float time about 1 hour. 4 persons are on board, 1 injury, fractured leg. We are a 25-foot sailboat, colored white with blue trim. Windsong, over. Sailboat Windsong, this is Station Cortez. Vessel 42136 is on the way to your position. Coast Guard out.
okay. So that would be, that's a by the book Mayday call. Now I've seen them where they don't even take that pause to wait for the Coast Guard to reply initially. They just give their name, their description, their position, what's wrong with them, all in one deal, and then they go out over and wait for the Coast Guard to reply back. So I've seen them both ways. So my suggestion is you make up a card with as much information as it's going to be generic, you know, the size of your boat, the color of your boat, whatever generic information you can get on there. You should know that the Coast Guard station, like in Bellingham, they have about a 3-year tour of duty there. So the people you meet there will have been there 3 years or less in most cases. So if you tell them you're a half a mile off, Point Podunk out here, the guy may or may not know where Point Podunk is. You tell him Latin Long, and he'll be able to find you on a chart. But if you give him in relation to a position, he may have no idea where that position is. Yes, sir.
So one question, by having your radio on channel 16, is it automatically at 25 watts if you are just listening?
It is if you haven't touched it, but if you've gone to a different channel and put it at low, or put it low and brought it back, it may or may not be. You'll just have to look at your radio and see. It should, I mean, you can just hit the high when you go back to 16. If you always want it on high power, just default it by hitting high. This radio up here, I noticed it always goes back to 16. Anytime I go off 16 and back on, it defaults to high power. So you'll just have to check your radio. Yes, sir.
So another one, does DSC, which you haven't come to yet, I don't think, does it automatically transmit latitude and longitude?
That's a good question. We're going to cover that in just a minute.
Okay.
That's the $10 million question right there. That's a great question. So responding, suppose you're out there drifting around in your boat, and you hear this Mayday, what do? Well, you don't transmit initially. You just sit there and listen, because you want the Coast Guard to handle it. You want somebody to coordinate it, and they're by far the best one to do that. So you're going to listen and see if they respond. So you maintain silence on the channel. If you're in a position to help and you verified that by writing down their Latin Long and figuring where you are in position of that boat, later on, you're in a position to offer that help. Now, if the Coast Guard doesn't reply, it could be the distressed boat is out of range of the Coast Guard. It's not likely, but it's possible. So they might ask you, if you don't hear the Coast Guard responding back, you can call the Coast Guard and say, are you aware of this Mayday call from this boat? If they say no, you might become the middle relay between the Coast Guard and this distressed boat. And this is a little sticker that's real common that you can get and stick on your on your radio. And you notice there, it doesn't show a break to wait for the Coast Guard to respond after you dish the Mayday. It just tells you to give them all the information. Okay. Any questions on making a Mayday call? All right. Now we're going to step into digital selective calling. It only operates through channel 70 in your radio. It signals other radios. It's like sending a text message out. It sends the position of your boat sometimes. And the reason I say sometimes is, remember, in 90% of the time the Coast Guard got a distress signal, there was no position information on it, because somebody either hadn't taken the time to hook a GPS unit up to it, or the GPS unit that was internally in it failed. But 90% of the time, it's not sending out position information when you want it to be sending it out. So take the time to learn if your DSC radio is hooked to a GPS source. The MMSI number then is registered to the owner of the boat. If you sell that boat, you're supposed to call up and cancel that MMSI number. You should know that when the radio is manufactured, it's allowed 2 MMSI entries. So if the guy who initially buys it tries to enter an MMSI number and flubs it and has to enter it again, that radio can't enter another MMSI until it's taken back to the shop and the memory is cleared on. So this radio that I bought through Craigslist, it's never had an MMSI number registered to it. So I got 2 opportunities to register this radio left, because nobody's ever used it. Now the MMSI goes to the owner in the boat, so I would use the same MMSI number I have on my other radio, and I would also enter it in this one if I put this radio on our boat. You get MMSI numbers from the Power Squadron. They're for free. They're for free from Boat US, unless if you're a member. If you're not, they're $25. And the FCC has granted those organizations authority to issue MMSIs because they really don't want to bother with it. So they'd prefer you use them instead of going to the FCC. You do have to go to the FCC if you get a station license. They have to issue you your MMSI number. Okay, a routine DSC call, and this is where your manual is going to come in real important, because I've not seen two radios yet where they're the same. There's different menus on them. There's different selections, but just go to your manual and figure out how to make a routine DSC call. They'll have a memory, I don't know what you call address logs in them, where you can enter a bunch of friends, MMSI numbers, so that you can pull them up. You can send out group DSC calls. I mean, we've owned our boat for 8 years. We have one MSI number on it, and it's Graham. And Graham can count on one finger how many times we've called him. So, I mean, I don't use this a lot. If I want to talk to somebody, I pick up my phone and I call them. But I know how to use it. I just don't use it very much. And it's not unlike sending them a DSC call. You send them a message, and then depending on the radio and the way the radio works, it'll either switch over automatically to the channel that you've pre-selected, like 68, or I mean, it seems like most of them are automatically switch over, but they might have to manually switch it over. I don't want to make that statement without reading the book. And then your radio should also automatically switch over to 68. But then once you get to 68, it's no different than any other radio call. Everybody in the world can hear you. It's not a private conversation, and it should be limited to less than 30 minutes or 30 seconds. They're not just for emergencies. You can make routine calls to other vessels. I'm not aware yet that you can call like harbor masters via DCS. I haven't heard that. I don't know. The thing with harbor masters, like if you're looking for slips, they don't want you to call till you're just outside the harbor, because too many people call way out and then never show up. So they reserve a slip for them, and the guy never shows up. So they want you to use 1 watt when you're talking to them and be right where they can see you. You go through the same process where you pre-select a working channel that's not being used. You program them into the message you're sending out, and you're going to see a demonstration here in just a minute. And then what I want you to listen to on this is what it sounds like when you receive a DSC call. It's 2 beeps, a pause, 2 beeps, a pause, and then it continually gets louder. And this is the only, I won't say this is the only thing we've struggled with on this presentation, but we have to go get this YouTube video.
Sorry.
This is Paul Harrison. This is a commercial right now, so you're not missing anything.
We believe that waste can be designed out of your daily life.
Okay, here it is.
Hello, Paul Harrison from Sea Voice Training here. I'd like to show you some marine VHF radio equipment we use at Sea Voice Training. We're using the Icon Marine VHF handheld radios and fixed sets, and also standard Horizon VHF radios. In the next couple of tutorial videos, we'll be showing you how to use these sets correctly and to be able to operate them in a routine call, an urgency call, and a distress call. Thank you. In this video, we're going to show you how to make an individual call to another station. So we're going to use the Solway LAS, the standard Horizon set, to call the Liver Bird, which is the Icon IC505. So first, we need to look at the buttons on the front of the standard Horizon, and we want to make a call. So we press the call button, which brings up another window, and it's asking us for an individual call, a routine call, an all ships call, or a position request. This call will be an individual call. So we now press the enter button. From there, we get another drop-down menu, which gives us anybody we've got in our directory. So if we put our friends' vessels or other vessels we know, we put their MSI number and their ship's name in there, that'll be in there, like you would have in your mobile phone. But I want to now make a call to Liver Bird. So I need to select Liver Bird. At the moment, it's on Liverpool Coast Guard, which is a shore station. I need to turn this up one to live bird. So with this black control knob, bring this up until it goes to live bird. We're now on live bird. We now press enter to confirm that we need to call them. And then again, we've got another drop down menu which asks us for the intership channels. So we're going to choose channel 8 as our channel to speak on. So we're going to choose channel 8. Again, bring it down to the channel 8 and then confirm by pressing enter. Are we now ready to transmit this? We are. This will transmit on channel 70, which is the DSC calling channel. Okay, so we're now going to press enter again, and that will send out the DSC to the other vessel. As you can see, our DSC now has gone, and it's now waiting for acknowledgement. And on the other screen, on the other vessel, the louder bird, you'll hear it is now making a sound. Okay, so you can hear that sound. That sound should get louder and louder all the time. So it's now louder. To stop that noise on the other vessel, so the other vessel now has received that call, they will now press the middle button on this set, which will confirm and stop that noise. They'll press it again, once more, and it will now come up able to comply or unable to comply. So we are able to comply, so we'll press that once more. And on our press, it says receive and acknowledge. We'll just turn this wheel, stop there, bring it down, press enter again to confirm, and then we're both on channel 8 and we can both speak to each other.
Simple.
Well, suddenly your cell phone's looking pretty good. I suppose Peter Carga's the only one who could have understood that guy talking. He's English also. All right, any questions on that? And again, it's very specific to the radio. So you'll need, I would apologize, first of all, I thought it was two tones. It's just the one tone for the single DSC call to you. It's just gets louder and louder and louder. Oh. Okay, why is DSC important to me? Well, making a personal DSC call isn't that important. But what you should know is that the bigger ships now that are controlled under the SOLAS agreement no longer monitor channel 16. So the way they're going to hear a distress is by you sending out a DSC distress call. The Coast Guard has what they refer to as a Rescue 21 program. So it ties all their boats and planes and ground facilities into the same communication network. Now they can still pinpoint your location without DSC. If you transmit and they have two receiving antennas, they can get a cross bearing on you and still come up with your position, which is what they used to do in the old days. But it won't be as quick and it won't be as accurate as if you have connected your DSC radio to a GPS or has an internal GPS. Okay, now this is the beauty of it, is it's such a simple way to send out a distress call. Now you should know that they want you to follow that up with a voice distress call, which you've already heard. But if you don't have time, you know, this is the way to go. You hit one button and you fight the fire. You don't have to sit there and talk to them on the radio. So it's only to be used for emergencies. The thing that totally floors me is every once in a while, you'll hear an emergency out there and the guy goes, well, it was an accident. Well, you got to push and hold that button for 5 seconds. So it's a pretty deliberate accident, if you ask me. You press and hold that button for 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. It sends out the alarm and you'll hear it. There's Paul's going to do another one of these DSC calls here for you. And what I want you to really listen to is what this sounds like on your end. So kind of just listen to what it sounds like. The first couple that we heard, we did not associate the alarm with our radio. We thought something else on the boat, like the autopilot had kicked off, or there was a low pressure oil, or something else was going on the boat. We didn't associate the distress call with our radio. So listen real carefully to what it sounds like. Oh yeah, and then again, we, you know, apologize for a little delay here. Oh, here we go. Here's Paul. So, Peter, we might ask you to decipher what he says here.
Sea voice training here. I'd like to show you some marine VHF radio equipment we use at Sea Voice training. We're using the ICOM Marine VHF handheld radios and fixed sets, and also standard Horizon VHF radios. In the next couple of tutorial videos, we'll be showing you how to use these sets correctly and to be able to operate them in a routine call, an urgency call, and a distress call. Thank you. In this video, we're going to show you how to make a distress call using digital selective calling on the ICOM ICM505. As you can see in the window, we have a position and time now as it's connected to a GPS, and it's also on high power, 25 watts, because we would expect that we'll be making, if possible, a voice distress call as well as a DSC call. So to make the DSC call, we need to lift.
Okay, hold on just a minute, folks. We're going to back this up. We heard you haven't been able to see it here. Now, when he makes this call, you'll notice he actually has time to select his distress. My guess is most of us won't have the time and patience to, oh, no, let's get the manual out and figure out how to go through the distresses.
This little flap and press this button for
Can you
5
back it
seconds,
up a
or press
little?
that for 5 seconds, and that will set 55 watts.
farther.
as we would
Did you not see any of it, Graham?
ICM
You seen it now?
505. As you can see in the window, we have a position and time now as it's connected to a GPS, and it's also on high power, 25 watts, because we would expect that we'll be making, if possible, a voice distress call as well as a DSC call. So to make the DSC call, we need to lift up this little flap and press this button for 5 seconds, or press that for 5 seconds, and that will send our distress on channel 70, sending our MMSI number, which is Maritime Mobile Service Identity, our position from the GPS, or what we've got on screen, and also what is wrong with us, what we require, whether we are sinking, we've got a man overboard, we've got a fire, or also piracy. So if I now press that button, you will watch the operation. 5 seconds. Then let go. And then we're waiting for acknowledgement. As you see, another vessel has received it. The handheld DSC radios all received it. So we press the enter button to stop the noise. And on here, it's now waiting for acknowledgement. Now, the only people who can acknowledge us is a shore station or a ship which has got Class A equipment. We will not get acknowledged by anybody else. So everybody else, we're now waiting on channel 16 for us to do a voice distress. I'd like to show you now the operation of standard Horizon, how to make a distress.
Okay, so the only thing I think to take away from that is, first of all, the ease of initiating the distress. If you've got the time to quantify the type of distress, my hat's off to you. Most people, I think, would just be pleased to be able to find the radio and the button. Another thing on the receiving end, by him silencing his radio, he was not in any way affecting the transmission of that distress. All he was literally doing was making it so it wasn't so irritating for him to listen to on his boat. The distress message still went out. It can only be replied to by the Coast Guard, or like this guy said, somebody operate with a Class A station. And then this is what typically happens. It goes out, gets into the Coast Guard system. It might go through even satellite communication to get distributed to all the boats and the ships that the Coast Guard has. Okay, we're just about done here, folks, so bear with me. This has gone a little bit longer than I thought it would tonight. Using the appropriate language on the radio, I mean, it should go without saying, but you'd be surprised what you hear out there. The skipper is responsible for the radio. It's a criminal offense to use profane or indecent language, and making felony calls. It is a felony to make a false distress call. And don't allow children to play with the radio. I mean, it'd take a 6-foot children to even reach ours, so I don't think that's. Then these are just common words. I'm not going to go through them, but they're just the way you talk over the radio, words that everybody uses. Go ahead, next one. And you end a transmission with over, out, but not both. When you finish your 30-second call to your buddy, you should say over or should say out at the end of that 30 seconds. You both should say that. And Wilco means Roger will comply. You don't say Roger Wilco. That's like a movie script. Okay, anything else there? And then these are just, again, common words that you would use on the radio. I think the only thing left is we just need to address, radio checks. You know, it used to be you could dial in C2, like around the, especially Friday Harbor area, and they had their own transmitting antenna, and you could talk into your radio if we went to their channel. I'll say it was 73 or whatever. You just talked in your radio on channel 73, and that antenna spit back your words and your voice right back to you, so you can check your radio that way. Well, C2 no longer does that. So you have to figure out some other way to make a radio check if you're interested to see if your radio works. You don't use channel 16. That's a classic no-no right there. And I wouldn't use channel 9, although you see it suggested a lot. And the reason I say I wouldn't use it is nobody listens to it around here. It's just not a used channel. But what is a used channel a lot is the working channel in the harbor where your boat's kept. So that's a good place to make a radio check. Just grab the mic and call the harbor master where your boat's kept at. Tell him you're doing a radio check. How do you copy over? See what he replies back. You can also call a friend and tell him, hey, look, can you go down and listen to 73 while I make a radio check to you at 6 p.m. tonight? And you go, yeah, I'll be there, no problem. So you want to use a working channel if at all possible. And now the DSC radio check, that's an interesting one. There's information out there that says you should be able to enter this MMSI number, which is supposed to be a generic MMSI number to the Coast Guard. You send it out, and then they respond back to you that they received your message. Graham's got a brand new radio. He tried it, and it responded with the same numbers that he sent out. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to send back the numbers of the station that's responding to you. So that's confusing. We tried it with our boat, and it went out, but it never got a response back. Now, our radio is 14 years old, so it was built before the requirement to have a test mode on your DSC. So I'm not sure, other than just having a friend, that's why Graham's name is actually in our MMSI, is he and I were always testing each other's digital radios. And so that's how we did it. And then we've already covered these, but the 10 weather channels, you hit the weather button, scan through the 10, see which ones you can receive.
And the handout you send them.
And then the handout has the channels in one corner of the handout. It should have the channels and their frequency. And then you can look on that big map that has all the antennas, and they show the frequencies. And then you can associate that with a channel in your radio. Okay, and I think lastly, Sarah, go ahead. I think that's, yeah, just in review, just a couple of questions here. When must the radio be monitored? Basically, whenever you're underway, that radio needs to be on. If it's on, it needs to be monitored. What do you do if you hear a mayday? Basically, sit on your hands for a few minutes. I mean, you can use your hands to write down a location and the name of a boat that's in distress, but don't get on the radio and try to help too much too soon. Let the Coast Guard assume the lead if they're available to assume the lead. And then what does the DSC tone sound like? I can play that. I have a recording of it. If you'd like to hear it again, but that's important to hear because you want to hear it? Oh yeah. Hold on just a sec. Okay, this is what it sounds like. I don't know what. All right, let me see it.
Did you hear that?
Could you hear that?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, let me.
Get close to the radio.
Okay, all right. Folks, that's all I got tonight. Thanks for your patience. I didn't realize it would go this long. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Email me if you think of something tomorrow. Other than that, I appreciate your attention. Is there more questions?
Can you go over one more time if I want to talk to a boat close by within a mile or closer, what procedure again?
Okay, it's just a normal DSC call. The first thing you do, turn on the radio, adjust the volume, adjust the squelch. You go to the working channels, find one that's not being used, make a mental note of that or write it down. You go back to 16. You verify that it's 1 knot, so low on the high-low button.
1 watt.
1 watt is low. And then you pick up the mic, push to talk. Wind song, wind song, wind song. This is Hanu, Hanu, Hanu. Suggest 6-8. Over. Then release the mic, see if they replied to you. Does that make sense? So it's real simple. It's the same procedure. Write it down and just, you know, even if you don't set the volume and the squelch, you just go through that mentally. I set the volume, I set the squelch. Okay.
Now the compliments are coming in.
Oh yeah. We need those in.
Thanks, Bill. Very good
We
presentation.
need those in writing.
Thank you. Very useful.
All right. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you very much.
Bill, this is Larry Bussinger. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yeah.
One comment on the handhelds. Most people, you know, with the boat radio, they don't have the handheld, but I think it's important to have that handheld for when you go out on the dinghy, that you can contact people if you run into trouble. And number 2 is if you ever go in the water, you might be able to summon help and direct Coast Guard or another boat to you. If you're in the water and have that radio, somebody can come to your location and may never even see you. But you can direct them in by saying, you know, I see your boat, come in left, come in right, and direct them right into you. So that's another use for that handheld, which means it's kind of smart to have both.
That's a great point. We have a ditching bag on our boat and keep it right at the back bulkhead. And it's just a bag that we throw things and keep things in. If we ever have to ditch, we just grab the bag and throw it in the skiff. And the handheld is in the ditching bag, along with, like, you know, those thermal blankets or a few other first aid things. It's just always there waiting to go. And Larry's exactly right. If a helicopter is dispatched to you, this is the way you'll be talking to them. You won't be calling them on your cell phone. So you'll be on this with channel 16. It's a great point.
How much
Thanks,
do
Larry.
one of those cost?
These are about 100 a quarter. You can spend a much more. I mean, you can get these now DSC. You use the MMSI number that's on your boat to enter into it. But yeah, you can get these now DSC, so they have their own internal GPS receiver. And so pretty hard to beat them, but they're not 100 a quarter.
Okay, Jim and Margie say strong work, guys.
Well, I would like to thank all of you for showing up tonight. I just want to turn the camera around so that you can see Donna and Graham really quick. Our support team. Does this show up? Can they see you?
I think so.
Thank you, Donna and Graham, very, very much for being here. And just 1 second here. Well, I can switch over.
Robin, thank you, and out.
All right.
So we, yes,
All right.
out. Yeah.
Well done, Robin.
This has been a little longer than we really expected. So thank you. And we hope to get workshops going after our BTC courses. Hope to see some of you in our BTC courses. There's a hard deadline for registering. January 25th is a hard deadline for the weather course, the ABC boating safety skills course, and then also Graham's boat handling course. So thank you all for being here tonight. See you again. Bye.
Stop recording.
What did I do?